All right, you have me, John Reynolds again, head of product at Aleo, and I'll let the rest of the panelists give a quick introduction of themselves and what you're working on right now. We'll start with you, Max.
Yeah, my name is Max. I'm a co-founder of Arcane Finance. It's a DeFi powerhouse on Aleo. We are the biggest DEX on Aleo. We also have a token launchpad and an NFT launchpad. Yeah, super excited to be on Aleo.
Hi, I'm Darren Camus, a co-founder of Ipor Labs. We build interest rate derivatives and asset management products. We are not on Aleo just yet, so I'm the outsider.
Big mistake.
I'm Jason, so I run marketing and BD for LSP Finance. We're a DeFi Protocol, so there's a liquid staking, also yield farming exchange you can do on our platform.
Awesome. Okay, so the panel is how DeFi Degens benefit from privacy. So I think I'll kick off with just a question. Is privacy just enabling more shady behavior in Web3 and crypto? Or is there a genuine public good here that we're enabling?
Well, I guess I can start. I think, in reality, it's both, of course. So privacy, definitely. So why degens need privacy? So for day-to-day transactions, at least from my experience, people really don't that much need privacy. At least unless they really doing something that they want to hide, like just their day-to-day business, they don't need privacy. But I think that there was a good point on one of previous panels that with chain analysis tools getting better and better, and especially AI tools getting better and better, it will be incredibly easy. So you open GPT-like interface and just ask, input the address and say hey, what does this person do? And at this point, probably everyone will start caring more about privacy. But yeah, degens usually when they want to do some kind of, let's say, drop hunting, so they want to get an airdrop and they create multiple accounts and they want to hide the fact that they are the same person behind all of that accounts. So for degens, it's usually something more on the shady side, I'd say, to be honest. Well, of course, it depends on who you count as degen, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll go a bit more philosophical. So I'm originally from the US. I've lived outside a long time now, living in Europe. And if you ask people, a very typical American answer is, well, I don't need privacy because I'm not doing anything wrong. And if you go in Europe, you hear a lot of, well, privacy is normal. And I think that this is probably a much better take. Privacy is something normal. For example, if you have a secret conversation or just a conversation in confidence between two people, you don't want to leak it everywhere. Privacy on chain is something that it can be dangerous. If the lack of privacy on chain can be dangerous. If you go to a coffee shop and you scan your credit card, that scan doesn't reveal the entirety of your assets. But if you interact on chain in an account-based, it's actually seeing the entire transaction history. You see wallet balance. You have different connections that you can link, and this can be dangerous. And we've seen actually physical crime against people in crypto, actually very targeted acts come at people because of lack of privacy in the physical realm. Knowing someone's address, but also for example, if in that same coffee situation, if you spend let's say $5 to get a coffee, and you were sitting on a couple of mil in your wallet, and someone can be an immediate target. So something like this it's not just for degens, it's for normal people, but blockchain and especially account-based systems, they're very not good for privacy. They unlock other things, for example, you can do on-chain marketing. You can have someone's net worth tied to an address, and you can send a message. This is really cool from an advertising perspective, but then on the privacy perspective, even if you're not doing something that is maybe shady or wrong, you have a need for privacy, and privacy is normal. So I would say that it's not just for degens. It's something that really is it's in everyday use. In just conversations and messaging and talking with people. You don't want everyone listening in on your conversation, even if you have nothing to hide. So I would say privacy is very normal.
I think I would say degens and shadiness. I think it's not entirely correlated, because honestly, I think a lot of behaviors will actually come from the traditional finance, the shady behaviors, or the VCs that we see in some of the recent token or VC token launch actually. And in some way, just offering other perspective, I do think being degen, for example, in my team, I'm probably the least degen one. That's what I hear showing my face. While the other teams are probably earning a lot already by their either meme coins or other altcoins. But I think in some way, it also offers sort of a protection. I think, for example, probably US, or I'm not sure US, but in certain countries it's free to do so. But also in certain countries, you have to be really careful with what you engage in, because crypto is a really tricky industry. And I do see that having a sort of privacy, having your identity really helps a lot of people to engage in more financial activities that they are not able to engage in if they be in their country. But anyway, I think when you talk about, of course, there's a lot of different behaviors. There's hacks. There's unfavorable behaviors that we see on chain that needs to be changed. But I think fundamentally, might not be related to degens wise. It's related to human nature, how we see the kind of finance industry, and also what kind of precautions that we do. So I think that's kind of points to other bigger issues. That's in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think going, kind of off of that, one of the exciting things to maybe think about is what are some of the key unlocks that are enabled by privacy and that we see, maybe degens or just, the broader crypto ecosystem getting excited about when we're talking about privacy in DeFi.
Yeah, actually, I'll start from opposite because, in degens, I think basically crypto native people, right? And crypto is public these days by default. And actually, there are a lot of things that are only possible with public chain. Think of meme coins and all so people are tracking which addresses hold which amount of these meme coins. So if the one who launched the meme coin holds too much, it's probably a rug, so we won't buy it. So there are a lot of actually use cases that just rely on this information being public. But as mentioned by others, so I think the closer we move from kind of typical degen products that exist today to something more TradFi-ish, normal-ish, I think the more privacy we need. So when it comes to payments, to some kind of purchases, we definitely need privacy. Degens won't be the exception. But for degen specific activity, I think privacy isn't needed.
Privacy, MEV. This is a perfect example of where you need privacy. If we look at TradFi, you have people that are really focusing on data latency. You have people that are they're buying satellite and microwave towers to send signals faster between New York and London because they're trying to get ahead in the order book. But that order book is the order book, right? So it's not really you can pay or corrupt someone to reorganize a block, right? So in traditional finance, people are really they're upgrading their infrastructure to have the best execution, but there's very little room for corruption. But privacy in DeFi, you can have a lot of MEV attacks because of the lack of privacy, and this becomes it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem because no one wants to broadcast their transaction first if it's going to be front run and it can be paid to be reordered. So all of these things are actually they change the fundamental structure of DeFi, and that's also a problem from a market perspective. So literally you have the potential issue of corruption just at the block level, at the sequencer level, because of its lack of privacy. And this is something that can be really improved. There's a huge amount of value extraction that comes out of this.
So I think when looking at, you say like privacy in DeFi, I think first we just identify who are actually the users. For example, if you're just regular retail users or DJ users, what you care about is, of course, whether the platform's secure, whether you have fun, whether you earn a lot of money. And based on basically more institutional users, and definitely, right, I think security will also be a major concern. So I think in my opinion, right, I think privacy is always there, but it has to, as a platform kind of perspective, it's really on what kind of users you're targeting, what kind of features you will be highlighting, or even let's say you're gonna enhance based on what you're looking at. So yeah, I think just based on that, privacy is always kind of a feature. I think even in DeFi space, in decentralized kind of like Web3 space. So yeah, I don't think that it's something that actually people will focus on when they're first looking at DeFi. It's probably going to be other issues, like I mentioned, intentions, looking at platforms, whether they can maximize your earnings. And again, I think a lot of users, what I see, they don't value their privacy, honestly. Even in, let's say, traditional kind of Web2 space, or if you're doing, let's say, on centralized exchange, you're also allowing others to access your information. But users are willing to do that because you can earn money. Of course, that's a major issue, major reason why you're engaging in financial activities. So I think maybe like the further question is, okay, now we want to highlight the importance of privacy. Then what can we do that? What can kind of raise the awareness? How do we tie it back to the features of DeFi, or just basically like financial activities?
Definitely. I think you made a great point too around some of the corruption as it relates to MEV and front running. I think these are things that I think majority of crypto, people who aren't necessarily involved in trying to optimize for those, for like revenue out as a result of those issues, feel the importance and the urgency to try and integrate and find solutions that use privacy to help prevent some of those issues and problems. That being said, I also think that privacy has danced the fence of regulatory scrutiny. When regulators aren't able to see behind the scenes what's happening, oftentimes they clamp down on trying to take over or shut down some of these networks. So do we think that, how do we think privacy is evolving now in the DeFi space, and do we think that it can survive some of the regulatory scrutiny that it has seen over the past several years?
Yeah, it's great that now the times are changing, it seems, under the new administration, and at least Tornado Cash is not this like something everything tries to run from. It's I think it's a positive change. But at the same time, I think it's a little too early to speak seriously about private DeFi regulation because, well, there is not enough volume, not enough private chains, private DeFi protocols, so that this just received enough attention from regulators at this stage. So we hope for the best, and I think some teams are working closely with regulators on this. But again, hope for the best.
I'll kind of look at it from both sides. So from a policy perspective, I would say that we won't get a lot of blockchain adoption at the government level because blockchain is public and transparent. And we find that a lot of people in power, they want it for others, but not for themselves. So, the transparency, for example, for the Trump token launch, we can see who the insiders are that are sniping that have, information asymmetry. We can look at the recent meme coin launches on Base, and there are a couple of guys that are basically front running the announcement. So this kind of lack of privacy is also very good for regulation. I mean, if you're a regulator, you should look at this and say, kind of this is your best friend. There was like early on, if you're familiar with the Silk Road case, there were 2 FBI agents that were working inside. They shut it down. But these FBI agents, they earned Bitcoin as payment, working for the Dread Pirate Roberts. And then they used their FBI credentials to try to get exchange accounts, because this was like the time when Bitcoin ran from 100 to 1200. And they used those credentials to offload their own assets, and they were trying to hide them. But because it was on the Bitcoin blockchain, the FBI used the public chain to shut down, to basically track their own activities. They trace the incoming address, they trace the UTXO, and it's provable on-chain forever, basically what their agents were doing. So this lack of privacy on the blockchain should be a regulator's best friend. If you were to do that same thing with like let's say a Mexican drug cartel going through HSBC and you have to get a court order to get into every one of these closed databases. So privacy, or the lack of privacy, is actually very good for regulators and probably very bad for the consumers. But if you look at what happens in, even on the banking side, you have the banking side in 2018, I think JP Morgan, they inked a contract with the Electric Coin Company, which is zero knowledge behind Zcash. Why? Because they're looking to add a layer of privacy on their own private blockchain, because they don't want to reveal the entirety of their depositors' addresses or history when they're sharing with other financial institutions. So this privacy at the banking level, even bank to bank, that is fully regulated, is also something that is, it's a requirement by the financial institutions. So, there's perspectives kind of all across the board. But yeah, privacy, the lack of privacy in DeFi is actually a regulator's kind of best friend, and I don't understand why there's this big pushback against it. Crypto is not anonymous, it's pseudonymous, and it's public and transparent forever. So, we want privacy also a little bit because of this, because it also can protect, the average person, but regulators should look at this and say, this is my best friend.
Yeah, I think there's different ways or two sides to look at it. I'll just take an example where I live in. Let's say for Taiwan, right, before you can use different kind of exchanges or different products, but now since it's regulated, you can only use, let's say, exchanges that will pass the regulations, but mostly they're local ones. Of course, government has certain concerns on money laundering, tracing them, foreign kind of fund. So in a way, from government standpoint, it's definitely beneficial for them. But for Web3 users wise, now I have to find different ways to cash out. I have to explore other ways, especially if, let's say, I'm in the DeFi space. But again, right, that's for me as a Web3 user. But let's say for my parents who doesn't really trust it, but when they see the regulation, they're like, oh, okay, now it's actually safe to buy from these Taiwanese exchanges, even though I can buy some major coins here, but I'm happy enough. So that's when I see actually Web2 users like my parents or non-native in this space here actually become interested, and because of the trust. And I think that expect to, again, security, privacy, that was provided by institutions. So it's hard to say whether it's good or bad. For me personally, I might feel it's bad, but again, it did provide I think necessary steps towards master adoption. And especially when, let's say, running DeFi projects, right? One of the challenges is always how do we onboard more users? Because there's just these Web3 users, most people are still out there. How do we in kind of build that kind of trust towards the platforms? So that's still kind of necessary in the long run. So I think just in summary, I still think there's two ways to see it. It's hard to say, whether regulations are good or bad. And it's kind of unstoppable as well, I guess, for governments, institutions. So I think the way is just as projects, as users, how do we kind of adopt to the trend?
Definitely. I think speaking of adoption, and we'll kind of wrap it up with this question, and then maybe open it to the audience if there's any questions from you guys. But what do we think is going to be the catalyst for some of the more broad adoption of privacy solutions in crypto? I think we've seen privacy kind of exist in a niche area of crypto, and it hasn't really expanded. I think some of like you mentioned, Max, like the administration changes has kind of increased some of the attention around privacy solutions in crypto. But is it institutional players adopting these solutions? Is it the technology maturing more? What do we think it's going to really take to bring privacy and then maybe like DeFi and crypto in general to a larger addressable market?
Yeah, I think it's several points you mentioned. So of course the technology should be good, should be usable, because people are used to having good UX these days, and another thing, I think that probably bigger institutions and even smaller companies, on-chain companies, they need privacy more than individuals, because that's their business, that's their financial success, they have competitors and so on. So I think they have more motivation to move into private space. And then let's say if they start, this can start growing from there. So if they start paying salaries on chain, it will also happen privately. So people will have more private, let's say private stables, and then they can spend these stables on something, purchasing something, like payments can go in the privacy space. So I think, but we definitely need some catalyst, and I think it can be businesses.
I'm not really optimistic. I think that most of the pushing in innovation, it gets pushed back at the compliance level or the regulatory level, and I think a lot of it is because we're using kind of archaic things to examine new technologies. So, for example, you were talking about Taiwanese exchanges, and you have this KYC. Blockchain is an open global financial system out of the box. So you can't push it into geographic bounds. You can't have these KYC regulations that are really, they can be enforced, in a banking system where everything is closed inside of borders. You have a Forex market when you jump across, but in crypto, it's, the genie is out of the bottle and you can't put it back in. So I think what the major catalyst will be, I think whichever technology and it'll probably be institution-led. Whichever institution takes not the first leap, but gets the first kind of mass adoption, then that will be the prevailing privacy technology.
So I think when we talk about adoption and privacy, I would look at it from different stakeholders, for example, from institutions or government. Honestly speaking, if I'm government, privacy for me, I still want to own your data, honestly. I want to know what's going on with you guys. For institutions as well, I think for banking, you also willingly give out your information. They can look up your ID, where you're looking at, even what you look at, how you look at. So I think for institutions or stakeholders that have in power, even I think in my last stage, or maybe why do I want people to secretly doing things without my notice? I definitely want to trace them. So that's so if you talk about privacy in DeFi, I'll just probably look at it more as in a user's perspective. It's what we want. We want that we can basically having the freedom, control of finance. That's already sort of in a part taken away in the traditional finance, but we find more opportunities in crypto, and we hope to own that. So I see as, if that's relating back to the topic like Degens, right? It's how we continuously to innovate. I mean, governments or institutions are always slower, but in a way we can always be faster. And also you see a lot of amazing things happening in that space just because people keep pushing it, communities keep pushing it. It's amazing to see that as well. So I am not sure whether privacy is going to be something that's going to be, in the future, it's going to be there. Are we going to, let's say when the governments take over sort of the crypto exchanges, crypto kind of or the kind of DeFi space, what are we going to do? But I think I still have hope because we're always moving faster as a community, as people in this space. And I think as long as that, I don't think there's still opportunities. And so I'm still looking forward to see what's going to happen in the ZeFi space, especially where I think every 2-3 months there's a new cycle. There's new things we never expected. So So yeah, I think there's really hope. So to see what's going on.
Great. All right. Well, I went a little bit longer, I guess, than I was expecting. So if you have questions, feel free to pull anyone aside after we finish up here. But thank you guys so much for the time, and thanks for listening.